Our guest the first hour today is Ken W. Good, and the website is pbtx.com. Mr. Good graduated from Hardin-Simmons University in 1982 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. He received a Master of Education degree in 86. He is part of the Texas, which is the Tarleton State University, a part of the Texas A&M system. In 89, he received his law degree from Texas Tech School of Law, where he was a member of the Texas Tech Law Review. He's argued cases before the Supreme Court of Texas and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, along with numerous courts of appeals, including the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. And there's been a real push for national reform, which has hit home in Texas, New York, and various other states. And it sounds like a really good idea, but there have been some unfortunate problems with this situation, this reform. Mr. Good, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
It is, as I was reading over the information, I thought of the game that I used to play with my children, Monopoly, and the get out of jail for free card. And which, when it's a game, it's one thing. But when it's life, it's something altogether different. And I can understand that the problem, which is a very serious problem, is the concept of not keeping someone in jail simply because they cannot afford to buy their way out, or they simply do not have a get out of jail for free card. But that is the case. But there's been a lot of issues and problems because of this reform in various places, not just in Texas, but in many places. And I can think of so many stories that I have read where people, particularly people referred to as illegals, undocumented workers, who seem to gravitate to the United States and feel that they can commit all kinds of crimes. And some of them get caught, and are let out of jail, and they commit more crime. So what is your role, and how do you view this, and tell us what's going on?
Well, historically the role of bail is to allow people to get out of jail as they're awaiting trial on their charges that they've been accused of. I think the Dallas Morning News recently ran a editorial which kind of highlights the dichotomy we're seeing. These reforms started out as we want to make sure that poor people can get out of jail and we don't have debtors prisons before conviction. But these proposals are morphing into other things that were never intended, and they're becoming situations where we're taking away all accountability. So like in Harris County, we'll see somebody who gets out of jail on a PR bond, which is a free bond, a government bond, and they miss court, and they get another PR bond, and then they miss court, and they get another PR bond. And, so they lose. It's because as more and more people miss court, traffic stop, they're checking for warrants. And so
You seem to be skipping or missing some of your words. Are you there?
Poor decisions, and it's causing problems, it's causing death, it's causing damage, causing injury.
Right.
And it's kind of bleeding over to the whole system.
Wow. And then, of course, recently there's been a lot of, since this seems irrelevant, but there's been massive people let out of jail, or at least their criminal records have been forgiven or forgotten if they were in there for possession of marijuana, which probably doesn't relate, but it's still relevant in the fact that the whole prison system seems askew to me.
Well, our system, even post-conviction and pre-conviction, is based on the same concept. We want to mete out whatever level of punishment or supervision that will get you back to the straight and narrow. So a first-time offender gets less punishment than a second or third or fourth-time offender. Same thing usually applies, or historically is applied, pre-conviction. You get, if they give you a PR bond and you fail on it, you miss court, then you don't get another one. What we're seeing is a complete dropping of accountability throughout the system. We're no longer meting out more punishment to get people's attention as they get more convictions, and the same thing pre-conviction. We're not. There's no consequences if you miss court. I mean, every time you miss court, the case gets put on hold until you come back, and that can be hours, days, weeks, months. But your case is put on hold, and large counties arrest large numbers of people on average, and they've got a conveyor belt they have to keep up with. And
Wow.
if they take away accountability, then you can just see it's like the I Love Lucy show in the candy, working for the candy company, and she can't keep up with the candies going by.
Oh, right.
And so the criminal justice system is turning into an I Love Lucy episode, except there's no humor in it.
Right.
It's just
not
tragedy.
Funny. Right. And I've always kind of questioned whether locking somebody up really makes them change, or perhaps just makes them more jaded when they get out. So I have in the past questioned the entire idea of locking somebody up. I think that the act that they were locked up for, if they stole property, the person that they stole the property from doesn't really get any restitution because the person that stole the property is sitting in jail somewhere and not really. He's paying for a crime. He or she is paying for a crime, but they may not be changing their behavior. And I don't know, it just seems like the whole prison system needs some sort of revamping.
Well, we do see a lot of that now. We see that where people are saying, well, we shouldn't punish that person because they did this act because they were poor. Someone broke into your house to steal food because they were poor.
Right.
And, it doesn't change the fact that there was a crime committed. As a society, we have to say certain things are crimes. But, things like that should go to punishment. I mean, that should always be taken into consideration for what is the punishment that fits the crime. The problem we have is we're taking all of that away, period. We have all these social ills today. We have drug use, we have schools failing, families failing. The problem is we can't address those social ills in bail reform. I mean, when they get to the criminal justice system, that's almost their last opportunity to turn around and become, successful people in society. And if we take away all accountability, we're really confirming to them they can get away with it. And so we're doing the opposite. And so, I think the unintended consequences of what we're seeing happening is doing the opposite of what they're hoping.
Right, right. Yeah, because I think that, as I say, I've recently questioned the entire process, and also the privatization of prisons, and the fact that a lot of the prisoners are used by corporations to the point that they're not addressing the needs of the prisoner. They're just saying, oh gosh, we could have this person work for 6 cents an hour and produce something for the corporation. So it just or they used to put them on a road gang and have them work their work. So it's, I don't know. It just,
Well, where the system is not working is in as it interacts with a person. You know, you can see where we're talking about, and even the federal government has cut some sentences shorter and let people out of jail. What we're not doing is we're not looking at people in an effective way and say, "Hey, you've learned, and you've become a productive person. You've gotten a high school education. You've completed
right.
your GED in prison." And I think probably the biggest thing that these people have in common is they failed in school, and so they failed in society. And so where we're failing them again is we're just cutting their sentence on an arbitrary number for certain offenses and saying, you get out. What we need to be doing is what we should be doing throughout the system is looking at individuals to say, okay, what do you need to change your conduct? And then come back and look at them to say, okay, have you changed your conduct? And as a result, should we shorten your sentence? We're not doing anything like that today. And so we're just doing the opposite. We should just, like in California, release this number of people. In New York, we should just, I guess, put up with more crime and just and not arrest people or not hold people and take away all discretion from the judges. That's the exact opposite of what we need. And they're surprised. They're shocked that these systems that they're trying out are failing. I mean, these are the very things that people like myself were telling them would happen when they were talking about doing them. And they just wouldn't listen. And now they're, quote unquote, surprised that these things that we said would happen have actually come to pass.
Right. And you mentioned New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, who really wanted to have some changes made, and now that the changes have been made, it's producing some results that he is totally against.
That's exactly right, and you can see some similar results between what's going on in New York and what's going on in Harris County. And it's I keep saying accountability, but Harris County, they did it where they're required to give them a PR bond on certain offenses, and they never see a magistrate. In New York, the judges have no discretion for certain offenses, and they have to release them without a bond, no matter what happens, no matter if they commit another crime, as long as it falls in a certain place on a certain spectrum, then they've just unilaterally decided that they will be released. I mean, I know here's the problem. They decided that the pendulum swung too far one way and the judges had too much discretion. So now they're trying to swing the pendulum to the absolute extreme opposite direction and take away all discretion of the judges. And it's having a worse. I was told, or I've always learned, when you're talking about major changes, the first thing you do is do no evil. Don't make the system worse. Well, that's what they're doing. The changes they're making have unintended consequences and are making the system worse, jeopardizing public safety and actually killing officers because people are finding out they don't have any accountability, and so they just commit more crimes.
Right, including murder, and getting away with it. And it's it's been horrific. They committed burglary, and then they're let out, and they commit another burglary elsewhere. And I know I live in the Chicago suburbs, and I think Chicago has one of the highest rates of shootings anywhere. And it seems, and yet you can't buy a gun, you can't buy ammunition in the city of Chicago. But we have all of these murders every weekend, same thing, and particularly drive-bys, and where children are being killed and innocent people are being killed, and there doesn't seem to be anything being done that would mitigate all of this crime. Obviously, it doesn't work to take guns away, because criminals are always going to find guns, no matter whether they live in Chicago or New York City or wherever they might live.
Well, but see here, Chicago and Illinois is further down, the path, because they don't have bail, and so they're further along the bad consequences. And it's not just because you don't have bail, but it's because y'all have lost accountability, as these other systems are trying to do. Because now you've got, they still have on average the same number of arrests in the large counties, even in Chicago, but they're not able to resolve the cases. So they've got such a huge backlog of cases that they're having to discount punishments to get the case through the system quicker. So it's almost making the system like you have to show up, you have to volunteer to show up to have your punishment given to you. And so, they're discounting murder, giving, incredibly low sentences that they wouldn't give anywhere else in the United States, because they have such a huge backlog. That's the only way they can get their cases to resolution. And cases that would be prosecuted in other places, they're having to just dismiss them because of the huge backlogs. That's what these other jurisdictions are going to see if they try to go down these paths.
Wow. It's just amazing that we've become a nation where there's so much crime with so little responsibility, personal responsibility for these crimes. And certainly you have to go back a few generations to figure out, okay, how did this one community or several communities or certain ethnic groups all of a sudden lose their family values and lose their enjoyment of a regular family unit, and now you have fatherless families and crime and prostitution, and it's just amazing if you look at history and see how crime developed and became so rampant. It's pretty sad.
It is real sad, and you can look, as these social ills have gotten worse over time. We've went through a period where we were hard on crime, and I think we're still living off the benefits of that period. We built a bunch of jails, but now we're seeing, we had so much success with that crime going down that now people are saying, well, we need to be smart on crime. We need to let people out of jail, and as it's having the expected consequences. As you're less hard on crime, then crime goes up. But there are things we can do to improve this system and to improve the criminal justice system so that it works. But it's not with the reforms that they're talking about. And, there are things that we have been talking about that I've been talking about for several years, that we need to incorporate into the bonding process, the criminal justice system. And, we can make the system better instead of a lot worse.
And what are some of those things that you have recommended?
Well, I think that if I'm a father of a daughter or a son, if if there's a 500% better chance that they're going to show up for court if they're on a surety bond than a PR bond, then I want my daughter or my son on a surety bond, because that will ensure that they will be there to get their case resolved. But what we need to do is we need to funnel as many people that can afford surety bonds to surety bonds, because we have a higher appearance rate. But we also have to put systems in place with the courts. So, like, these most recent cases from the 5th Circuit and the 11th Circuit that have said if someone cannot afford the bond that is set, like on a bail schedule, within 48 hours, they have to have a hearing so that they can ask for a deviation. Our friends on the other side want to say, well, that treats poor people differently. But that's been addressed by the 11th Circuit. It says they may be treated differently initially, but then their status is elevated and they get special treatment because they get a hearing within 48 hours of arrest. And so the problem is we have to figure out, how do we quickly process large numbers of people through the jail in a large county? And then after we do that, we get as many out on a surety bond. We get poor people out within 48 hours, those that they believe should get out. Then we have to keep up with those that are still in jail. Re-magistrate people after 72 hours. I mean, Texas has a law that if you're charged with a misdemeanor and you're in jail after 30 days, you have a right to a PR bond. Well, we have situations where it didn't happen and someone ended up dying in jail, 5 or 6 months later because she got lost, or she got forgotten, or she refused to even go to court because she had mental issues. And so we have to work to track the people in jail. We have to know who's in there pre-conviction, and after a while we have to bring them back to court and say, why are you still here? And find out if they're eligible for release. And then the last thing we should do is, in these larger counties, we have to figure out, do we need more courts? If we've got most of the people in jail are waiting on felony charges and they're waiting to be tried, and the district courts are trying cases as quick as they can, then maybe we just need more district courts if they're doing their job well, so that we can tackle this. I mean, our job is to get people to court, not to address these social ills. That's all that bail does, is get them to court.
Wow. I was reading about one of the cases from Pasadena, Texas. Alex Guajardo. Oh, that is heartbreaking. He murdered his pregnant wife and unborn child by stabbing her 20 times in the stomach.
Yes, after he had already been arrested 2 or 3 times and given PR bonds each time, all within a few weeks. And one of the times he was arrested was for assault family violence. And again, he was given a PR bond, and a protective order was entered. And 2 days later, he murdered his pregnant wife. And the terrible, terrible thing about that, the reason why we know the system is broken, he was arrested for murder for capital charges and was given no bond. But on all of his misdemeanor cases, they gave him new general order PR bonds. So, but for the hold, he would have been released all over again, because that's just what the computer did. It's automatic. No accountability. The system's completely broken. Whoever designed it has the blood of Caitlin's unborn baby on his hands. And they're just saying, well, this is what we have to do.
Wow. So if things had worked differently, if he had been in jail, it certainly would have saved his wife, who died.
If a magistrate had held him accountable for he's out on a PR bond and he gets rearrested on a new charge, well, he shouldn't be eligible for a new PR bond.
Right.
Because he wasn't successful on it. Either he failed to appear. No, he didn't. He got accused of another crime. So then he's going to have to post. If you're going to do that, well, fine. he can do a surety bond. And if he then gets another charge, which he did, well, 3 times he's not been successful, he gets additional charges. The Texas Constitution allows in that situation family violence for him not to be released. But we're doing the same thing, or they are doing the same thing over and over and expecting the results to be different.
Right.
And the judges, we have some new judges that were elected with the charge that they were going to do this. And so their response is, well, the system's working. Well, it is working the way they planned it, but it is absolutely devastating to public safety.
Right. And there was already a restraining order had been issued against him, but a restraining order it doesn't work in most of the time, because if a person is going to kill somebody, they're not going to allow a piece of paper to prevent them from committing violence, obviously, and it's just a piece of paper. And by the time that like for instance, his wife, had she been able to call for help, well, it just didn't work. So people who are going to murder somebody are not going to pay attention to a restraining order.
Well, and if there's no consequences in prior conduct, these people will learn. Well, there was no consequences when I did this, and then there was no consequences when I did this, so they're going to push the envelope. These are wayward children. This is the reason why they got in trouble. And wayward children, when there are no consequences, they don't say, "Oh, I need to change." They go, "No, I'm going to keep going until somebody tells me to stop." That's what we're having happen.
Right. Like if a child gets into the cookie jar and his very lenient mother said, "Oh, it's okay, sweetheart," then they learn that, all they have to do is act a certain way, or just act like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and there's no responsibility or some sort of punishment, like, okay, you don't get any cookies for a week. But if there's no punishment, it all gets back to the family unit. Okay, we're going to a quick 3-minute break. We'll be right back. Alrighty, our first guest today is Ken W. Good. The website of interest is pbtx.com. And during the break, I was thinking about several things about the family unit as a whole. It seems that over the generations that parents are no longer parents. They want to be friends with their children rather than give them rules that they are expected to adhere to, and that causes this lack of punishment for acts committed within the home. And if you get away with things in your home and your parents are trying to be your friend rather than a parent, and set rules where there is some sort of consequence, then children grow up thinking there are no consequences to their behavior. Would you agree with that?
It's funny you say that, because my daughter is 20 and she's a junior at Baylor, and she came to me when she was in high school and she said, why aren't you more like so-and-so's parent? They're like their best friend. And I just laughed and I said, you got the raw end of the deal, because I'm not even shooting for friend, I'm shooting for parent. And that's my job. And last semester she went through Baylor and spent the semester in DC, and she was interning at the White House while they were talking about impeaching the president, and she was in the White House press office in the West Wing every week this last semester. So I think she learned different values than me trying to be her friend.
Right. I totally believe that consequences should meet the behavior. And but when you look at the generation of parents who have abandoned their job as parent, and there is a lot of pressure to be the kind of parent that is the child's friend. Children don't, they've got friends. They need parents who will give them proper guidance on behavior and what society expects from them and what they owe society. We owe society something. And so I think we're both on the same page there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what we have to include in this element is, we have bigger problems in the inner cities.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's where large segments of our population are just abandoning. So what's being left in the inner cities are getting ravaged. We keep hearing that there's disproportionate percentages of people in the inner cities of certain races being accused of crimes, but those are crimes committed on that same racial group. And so we've got an inner city crime problem that's not being addressed because of failure in schools, because of the proliferation of drugs, the failure of the families, and so on, the loss of economic opportunity. And how do we address our inner city problems when, so much of that is politics these days, and you could see you could argue that some of the inner cities have specific politics that prevents them from being successful because they don't have any pressure to change what they're currently doing because they're a one-party town. And we need to change that perception. We need a different strategy for our inner cities. But, we're now at the end of the process when they come to the criminal justice system. That's not the time or the place to address all of these social ills. We should have addressed those social ills for that person 10 years before they ever came into the criminal justice system. But once they come into the Harris County is doing a study right now why people don't show up for court. And they've already agreed in a settlement that they're going to pay for whatever the result of the settlement, or whatever the recommendations are. So if this study says, well, people don't come to court because they don't have a cell phone, the county is going to give them a cell phone.
Oh,
if
dear.
the study says they don't come to court because they don't have a ride, the county is going to give them a free ride. And if the study says, well, they don't have child care, then the county is going to give them free child care. We're going to be rewarding people to get into the criminal justice system. You want a phone? Go commit a crime. It's ridiculous when we're having to give perks to people to get them to show up for court. And we think that's going to get our caseload to go down. The numbers of pending cases in Harris County on the misdemeanor courts have almost doubled since these new judges and these changes that they've proposed have gone into effect. That's less than a year, or just around a year. Are they going to double again in another year? You can see the criminal justice system will collapse under these reforms.
Right. And certainly you're right. And it seems like, let's be fair, this poor person doesn't have a cell phone, and at the types of things that you suggested, we're actually paying people to do what they're doing. And the inner city is a big problem in Chicago. And the people in the inner cities, they have access to guns. They are ghettoized in an area where they just seem to be trapped. And you don't have to have a wall around them. They're in the inner city, where the schools might not be as good, where the family units have been broken up, where fathers have abandoned their families, and it didn't used to be that way, and where you'll find the proliferation of drugs and guns, and they are committing crimes against each other, which is is just a real shame. Where, in fact, I'm referring to the black population, they used to be very family oriented, and then all of a sudden you place, for instance, abortion clinics within the inner city, where there are more blacks and more Spanish people are using the abortion centers than white people. So it's just very destructive to certain ethnic groups, and I feel really, really bad for that, because there are people in the inner city who are really struggling to have some sort of civility, and they're doing it pretty much on their own. And
well, and I think that the issues that you've talked about are absolutely correct. I would just say I think that those are a social status, or the effect of a social status, more so than a race. I mean, we still have black families that have strong family roots. We have Hispanic families that all have Hispanic roots. I mean, have strong family roots. But when you get to a certain socioeconomic level, and it's at the bottom of the spectrum, and it's in the inner city, no matter what race you are, white, red, green, blue, or whatever, then you're going to see more of the very issues that you talked about. And so I wonder, I kind of agree with the people that say this isn't a race issue, it's a socioeconomic issue. And we are killing the people in our inner cities, and there seems to be disproportionate numbers of certain races in the inner cities because they can't get out.
right. Yes.
And so we've got to address those issues, but criminal justice reform is not the place. And that's why I think we have some people that are proposing these reforms saying these people shouldn't even be charged with crimes because they're poor. And you can see where everything we've talked about comes into play there. But if you're not a country of laws, then you are not a country. And so we have to address those things, but not in the criminal justice system, except for maybe in punishment. But we can't just take away all accountability because someone is in the inner city. We can't say, oh, you don't have to show up for court. We can't say, oh, you don't have to plead guilty. We're going to dismiss your case and just please don't do any more. I mean, Guajardo didn't learn from that. I mean,
No.
what we're trying is not working. And the problem that we're having right now is our friends on the other side are just putting blinders on. I mean, they're like Secretariat with a blinder on, and they're not looking anywhere but ahead. They won't even admit there's a problem. If we show that their pending cases are going way up, if we show them their failure to appear rates are going up, their response is you're lying. I mean, thank God we have New York where their response is, oh, it is a problem. They're not just saying, oh, you're lying. I mean, we've got the same situation in Harris County. In Harris County, they're just saying, oh, no, it's working. I mean, we've got a county surrounding Harris County that's saying, we think Harris County is working so well, we're going to implement it, even though, the administrative agency over courts in Texas has said they don't want any other county in Texas to implement the Harris County model because they don't like it. Well, here's some more activists saying in a county right next door, oh, we should do that too because it's working so well. It's not working well. It's destroying criminal justice in Harris County. Let's be honest. Let's at least have an honest debate about it.
Right. Wow. So what can people do?
Well, I think what can people do? I think we can talk about the issues. We have to talk to our legislators. I work with the legislature and propose bills and testify on bills and propose changes to the legislature in this area of the law. And, it lasts for many years, but especially the last two legislative sessions, I spent a lot of time in Austin talking to people about these issues. When our local associations, the best thing that someone who doesn't feel comfortable talking, who doesn't feel like they can have an intelligent conversation on this issue,
the best thing they can do is develop a relationship with their local elected official, so that when we need to get into the door to talk to them about this issue, they're not talking to me, they're talking to their friend who's allowing me to talk. And so when people come in and they say, "Oh, hi, Joe, how are you doing? Thanks for working on my campaign. Hey, I want Ken to tell you about an issue." And so I talk to him, tell him what's going on. And then I have the credibility of the friend, the relationship they already have. And that's how you start. You start with it. We have personal relationships with people at the legislature, and we talk to them about our issues. But we have to get to where we can have an honest debate. I mean, if we're going to have, look at Alaska. Alaska enacted some of these very same reforms, and then they evaluated them and said they're not working. They're making the system worse. And so they came in and repealed a bunch of them. We've got to all be on the same page. We've got to all be able to look each other in the eye and agree that red is red, blue is blue. I mean, I can't look up at the sky and say it's blue and then have them say it's red. If we can't agree whether something is working or whether it's not, whether they say it's working because it's more fair to the poor, even though it's terrible for criminal justice, that's not working. And so we've got to get to where we'll have an honest discussion of the issues. And that's going to be hard. But you know what? New York's done it. They all agree it's not working. Why can't Harris County have that same honest discussion? I don't know.
Right. I think a lot of people who have attempted to establish a relationship with the politicians that are supposed to be representing our best interest have lost confidence in the political system and feel like, well, these people, there's so many lobbyists and there's so much, they are getting money from certain entities to vote one way, which is not in the public interest. And so
I think that's probably true. But we use lobbyists as well. It's hard to get in to see people who are busy. And when you have a lobbyist, all you're doing is, again, you're using someone who has relationships or that knows their staff. So it's a very similar concept. But I know of a situation in Texas where a lone bondsman went down to the legislature to oppose a change. And I mean, everybody wanted it. And he just went down the halls talking to anybody that would talk to him. And he went there week in, week out. And he single-handedly defeated the bill that everybody was in favor of, just by being a good old boy who had a story to tell, and he was just patiently waiting his turn to tell it. And so it may be an investment of time, but, I'm a very optimistic person. I believe that people want to do things right for the country. And I believe, maybe I'm a little bit too much like, Mayberry RFD, but I really believe we all have the basic same beliefs in our country and our government. We all want it to work better, not worse. And, the reality on these reforms that our friends are pushing is they will fail, and they will fail dramatically. And the problem is going to be these activists are going to be long gone, and it's going to be left to the people who oppose these same changes to fix the system. And we're going to be we're going to be there to fix the system in those places where they do it. We're going to be in New York telling them how to make the system better, and we're doing that now. We're doing it everywhere else, and we're stopping places from doing the same thing because we're showing them these statistics, and they're going, we don't want any part of that. And so that's, Harris County's been a great model for what shouldn't happen. And New York is now reaching the same level. Alaska is a great place to look to.
Wow, that's great. Okay, we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. This is Deanna, and our first guest today is Ken W. Good. And the website of interest, and I posted it in the chat room, is pbtx.com. And Mr. Good, I would invite people to this website there are so many resources, and we've been talking about what people can do, and you have there are so many resources on the website. Can you talk a little bit about the website and how visiting that site will assist people to do what you recommend?
Absolutely. We have, this is pbtx.com is a state Professional Bondsmen of Texas website. We have a bail information page on there, which think of it as a database of information. We have some pamphlets on there, pamphlet 1, 2, and 3, which is on the additional materials page. The first pamphlet just gives you an overview of the issues. The second one highlights failed bail reform across the United States. And the third one we just released in the last 2 weeks is a summary of all of the studies and that have been done that have now concluded that risk assessments should not be used as a part of criminal justice reform, that our friends on the other side keep proposing that we use risk assessments and just use that as a basis for releasing people. Well, now the scientific data is all in agreement that they should just not be used in this way at all. And then it's a website. We have a blog that has stuff on there almost every day, and we're printing articles, publishing articles on legal publications. We have one coming out in the next couple of weeks. We have articles on what does successful bail reform look like? So we're not just saying what's not working. We're saying here's what works. Here's what we should be doing. And it's also a website that will continue to grow as we get ready for another legislative session. So it's a place that you can go to and continue to return to often to get new information.
And that is the beauty of this website is, okay, you've recognized the problem, and now you have given solutions. There are solutions where each individual, as they visit your website, can look particularly at the blog, the links, and all of the information so that each person can do something, get to know what's going on, because I think that this is something that people don't ordinarily think about unless it impacts their family to some degree. And I think that this really could impact every family, depending on what happens within their family, what crimes are committed against their family. It's just a wonderful resource for people who want to help and to understand what you've been talking about.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I mean, we've worked really hard. We have a team that's worked really hard on the website, and I think they've done a wonderful job. And I think that is what we're trying to do with that. But we're all struggling with these same issues. I think we all have family issues that over time have drug issues. I've had that with a sister, and at one point I told her, very similar to what I told my daughter, I'm not worried about trying to get you off. I'm worried about your soul. And so your long-term relationship with God. And so that's what we should all do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so very much for being on the program today and for all the information and the encouragement. And keep doing what you're doing. It's fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Stay with us. We'll be right back.